The stars had watched the rise and fall of empires for billions of years. They had seen species crawl out of oceans, reach for the sky, and eventually touch the void between worlds. Most of those species were now dust and forgotten memories. But some had survived, some had grown powerful beyond measure, and some had decided that power gave them the right to rule over all others. The hegemony of the 12 stars was the oldest and most powerful alliance in the Orion arm of the galaxy. For 40,000 years, they had controlled hundreds of star systems. They had crushed rebellions, absorbed younger species, and eliminated any threat to their authority. The member species of the hegemony believed they were the chosen rulers of the cosmos. History, they thought, had proven them right. At the heart of the hegemony sat the Grand Council. They met in the Obsidian Citadel, a massive station that orbited a dying red star. The station was older than most civilizations. Its black walls had witnessed decisions that shaped the fate of entire worlds. Inside its great chamber, 12 seats formed a circle around a holographic display that could show any corner of their vast domain. 3 species held the true power within the council. The others were members in name only, allowed to speak but never to decide. The Valanthi were the first among equals. They were tall beings made of living crystal. Their bodies glowed with inner light that shifted colors based on their thoughts. They had evolved beyond flesh millions of years ago, uploading their consciousness into crystalline forms that could survive the vacuum of space. The Valanthi valued logic above all else. Emotions were weaknesses they had discarded long ago. Their leader, Archon Velith, had guided the hegemony for 3,000 years with cold, calculated precision. The Krethvor were the warriors of the council. They were massive reptilian creatures covered in armored scales that could stop most weapons. Their claws could tear through metal, and their teeth could crush bone and steel alike. The Krethvor had conquered their home system through pure violence, and they had brought that violence to the stars. They commanded the hegemony's military fleets and took great pride in the species they had defeated. Admiral Krethax, the supreme military commander, kept a collection of skulls from every species he had personally helped to conquer. The Sindari were perhaps the most feared. They appeared almost fragile compared to the others. Their bodies were thin and gray, with 4 large black eyes that seemed to look through rather than at whatever they observed. But their true power lay in their minds. The Sindari were psionics. They could read thoughts, plant suggestions, and in extreme cases, shatter a being's sanity with pure mental force. They had no need for physical weapons when they could make enemies kill themselves with a thought. On this day, like many days before, the council had gathered to discuss a routine matter. A new species had been detected at the edge of hegemony space. This happened every few centuries. Young species would develop faster than light travel and stumble into the domain of their betters. The response was always the same: submit or die. Most submitted. The few who refused became warnings to others. "The species calls itself human," reported the Sindari representative, her voice a whisper that somehow filled the entire chamber. "They originate from a small planet in an unremarkable system. They call their world Earth." The holographic display shifted to show a blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star. It was beautiful in a simple way, covered in oceans and clouds. Data scrolled alongside the image, providing basic information about its inhabitants. "How primitive," Archon Velith observed. His crystalline form pulsed with pale blue light, indicating mild curiosity. "They have only recently achieved interstellar travel. Their first vessel crossed into our territory 3 cycles ago. The vessel was called the ESS Prometheus," the Sindari continued. "We intercepted and scanned it before allowing it to retreat. Our analysis is complete." More data appeared on the display. Images of humans in various forms. Their biology, their technology, their society. Admiral Krethax leaned forward, his massive scaled body shifting in his seat. His yellow eyes studied the images with the look of a predator examining potential prey. "They are soft," he growled. "No natural armor, no claws, no venom. How did they even survive on their own world?" "They are tool users," the Sindari explained. "They compensate for physical weakness with technology and numbers. Their intelligence is adequate but unremarkable. No psionic ability whatsoever. Their minds are completely closed to us, but only because there is nothing there to read. They think in simple, linear patterns." "Lifespan?" Archon Velith asked. "Approximately 80 of their years, perhaps 100 with medical intervention." A sound that might have been laughter came from Admiral Creethax. 80 years? We have council members who have lived for 80,000. What can such brief creatures possibly accomplish? The Archon's form flickered with colors that indicated agreement. They are clearly no threat. Another minor species to be catalogued and controlled. What is their military capability? Limited, the Sindari replied. Our scans detected approximately 200 vessels capable of interstellar travel. Most are exploration or cargo ships. Only about 40 appear to be military in nature. Their weapons are primitive energy projectors and kinetic launchers. Their shields are barely functional by our standards. 40 ships. Admiral Creethax made a sound of disgust. I have more vessels in my personal guard fleet. This is beneath our attention. Archon Velith raised one crystalline hand, calling for silence. Nevertheless, protocol must be followed. Every new species must be given the choice. It is our way. The hegemony's way was simple and had not changed in millennia. When a new species was discovered, they were offered two paths. The first was submission. They would accept hegemony rule, provide resources and labor, and in return would be protected and guided by their superiors. Many species lived this way, serving the elder races in exchange for survival. The second path was defiance. No species had chosen this path in over 3,000 years. Those who had chosen it no longer existed. Prepare a diplomatic vessel, the Archon commanded. We will send an envoy to deliver our terms. These humans will learn their place in the natural order of the galaxy. The hegemony's diplomatic vessel arrived in Earth's solar system 2 months later. It was called the Voice of Authority, and it was not really a diplomatic vessel at all. It was a battleship disguised as a messenger. This was standard practice. The hegemony believed in negotiating from a position of obvious strength. The Voice of Authority was 5 kilometers long. Its hull was made of materials that most civilizations could not even identify, let alone produce. It carried weapons that could crack planets and shields that could withstand the heat of a star. As it approached Earth, it made no attempt to hide its power. Every sensor in the system could detect it. That was the point. Humanity's response was not what the hegemony expected. Instead of fear and panic, the humans sent a welcoming committee. 3 small ships approached the Voice of Authority and requested permission to guide it to a meeting point near their moon. They were polite, they were professional, they showed no signs of the terror that usually accompanied first contact with a hegemony vessel. The envoy aboard the Voice of Authority was a Valanthi named Crystalline Voice of Reason. He had performed this duty many times before. He knew exactly how the conversation would go. The primitives would be awed by the ship. They would recognize their own weakness. They would accept terms quickly to avoid destruction. It was always the same. The meeting took place in a space station orbiting Earth's moon. The humans called it Gateway Station. It was small and unimpressive compared to hegemony construction, but it was functional and clean. Human representatives waited in a conference room with large windows that showed both the moon below and Earth in the distance. Crystalline Voice of Reason entered the room with 4 Krethvor guards behind him. The guards were unnecessary, but they added to the impression of power. The humans in the room were military officers and government officials. They stood as the delegation entered, showing proper respect. I am Crystalline Voice of Reason, envoy of the hegemony of the 12 stars, the Valanthi announced. His form glowed with authority. I bring word from the Grand Council to the species known as humanity. A human female stepped forward. She wore a uniform decorated with medals and insignia that meant nothing to the envoy. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Nations Space Command. On behalf of Earth and all human colonies, welcome to our system. We are honored to receive representatives of such an ancient civilization. The words were correct, but something in her tone was wrong. Crystalline Voice of Reason had heard countless species speak to him. Most trembled. Most could barely form words. This human spoke as if she were greeting an equal. You are aware of why I am here? The envoy asked. We have guesses, Admiral Chen replied. But please, enlighten us. Crystalline Voice of Reason projected a holographic document into the air between them. It contained the standard terms of submission, translated into the human language called English. The hegemony of the 12 stars has ruled this region of space for 40,000 years, he began, reciting words he had spoken many times. We have brought order to chaos. We have lifted primitive species from darkness. We have maintained peace through strength. Your species has now entered our domain. This requires a decision. Admiral Chen studied the document floating before her. Her face revealed nothing. You have two choices, the envoy continued. The first is to accept membership in the hegemony. You will acknowledge the authority of the Grand Council. You will provide resources and labor as required. In return, you will receive protection from all threats and access to technologies beyond your current understanding. Many species have chosen this path. They live in peace and prosperity under our guidance. And the second choice? Admiral Chen asked. There is no second choice that leads to survival. The room was silent for a long moment. The human officials looked at each other. Some whispered quietly. Crystalline voice of reason waited. He had seen this before. The realization of helplessness, the acceptance of reality. Admiral Chen turned back to face him. May we have time to consider your offer? You have one of your months. After that, if we have not received your submission, we will assume you have chosen the second path. That seems fair, Admiral Chen said. We will give you our answer. The envoy departed Earth's system confused. The humans had not begged. They had not wept. They had not immediately agreed to terms. This was unusual but not concerning. Some species needed time to accept their fate. In the end, they all made the logical choice. 30 days later, a human vessel arrived at the edge of hegemony space. It carried a single message, addressed to the Grand Council. The Council gathered to receive humanity's answer. Archon Veleth projected the message for all to see. It was brief. To the hegemony of the 12 stars and its Grand Council, humanity has considered your terms of submission. We recognize that you are ancient and powerful. We recognize that you have conquered many species. We recognize that refusing you may mean war. We decline. We did not reach for the stars to kneel before those who reached them first. We did not survive ice ages, plagues, world wars, and our own worst impulses to become servants of another species. We did not build ships to carry us across the void so that we could hand those ships to strangers and accept chains in return. You offer us peace through submission. We will find our own peace, or we will have none at all. You threaten us with war. We have been at war with ourselves since before we had fire. You do not frighten us. Humanity stands. We will not kneel. The message ended. The council chamber was silent. Then Archon Veleth laughed. It was a strange sound, coming from a being of living crystal. He had not laughed in centuries. Remarkable, he said. They actually refused. How refreshing. How utterly foolish. Admiral Krithax rose from his seat, his scales bristling with excitement. Give me the order, Archon. Let me remind the galaxy what happens to those who defy us. I will turn their little planet into a monument to their stupidity. The Archon's form pulsed with colors of amusement and contempt. Very well. Dispatch the third cleansing fleet. Show these humans the error of their choice. Leave nothing behind but a warning. It will be done, Admiral Krethax growled. Within 3 cycles, the species called humanity will exist only in our historical records. He left the chamber already planning the campaign. 200 warships. More than enough to destroy a civilization. The humans had no idea what was coming. They had signed their own death warrant with their arrogant little message. The other council members returned to their duties, already forgetting about the minor species that had dared to refuse them. In a few months, humanity would be gone, and the universe would continue as it always had, with the hegemony at its center. None of them could have known how wrong they were. In the Sol system, humanity was not waiting in fear. From the moment the hegemony's envoy had arrived, they had been preparing. They knew refusal meant war. They had refused anyway. Admiral Chen stood in the command center of Earth's new defense network, watching data scroll across dozens of screens. Around her, thousands of people worked with desperate purpose. Shipyards that had been building exploration vessels were now building warships. Factories that had been producing consumer goods were now producing weapons. Scientists who had been studying the stars were now studying the technology captured from hegemony probes. How long do we have? Her aide asked. Months, maybe, Chen replied. Maybe weeks. We have no way of knowing. Is it enough time? Admiral Chen looked out the window at Earth hanging in the blackness of space. 7 billion people lived on that world. Millions more in the colonies. All of them were counting on her and everyone in this room to do the impossible. It will have to be, she said. Because we're not going to get any more. Across the system, humanity worked. They built, they planned, they prepared. They did not know if they could win, They did not know if they would survive, but they knew one thing with absolute certainty. They would not go quietly. The hegemony had ruled the stars for 40,000 years. They had never faced a species like humanity. They had never faced a species that had spent its entire existence fighting against impossible odds. They had never faced a species that treated extinction as a challenge rather than a threat. They were about to learn what that meant, and the galaxy would never be the same. The third cleansing fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system like a storm of metal and fire. 200 warships arranged in perfect formation, each one a weapon of destruction that had been perfected over millennia. At the center of the formation flew the flagship, a massive vessel called the Extinction's Promise. It was 10 kilometers long and bristled with weapons that could turn continents into glass. Admiral Krethax stood on the command deck of the Extinction's Promise, watching the human system appear on his tactical display. His yellow eyes moved across the screen, noting the positions of planets, asteroid belts, and the tiny dots that represented human activity. He felt nothing but contempt for what he saw. Pathetic, he growled to his officers. Their entire defense force could fit inside our cargo bays. The Krethvor around him made sounds of agreement. They were eager for battle, but they did not expect one. This was not war. This was pest control. The humans would either flee or die. And either way, the operation would be over within days. Begin the advance, Admiral Krethax commanded. Standard cleansing formation. We will proceed directly to their homeworld and demonstrate what happens to species that refuse the hegemony. The fleet moved forward as a single unit. Their formation was perfect. Each ship exactly where it should be. Exactly where ships had been in every cleansing operation for 3,000 years. The hegemony's military tactics had not changed in that time. They had no need to change. When you possessed overwhelming force, subtlety was unnecessary. 6 months had passed since humanity received the hegemony's ultimatum. 6 months of preparation. 6 months of humanity doing what it did best, surviving against the odds. Admiral Sarah Chen watched the enemy fleet from a command station hidden deep inside an asteroid. The rock had been hollowed out and turned into a fortress. Dozens of similar installations dotted the outer system, each one invisible to enemy sensors, each one waiting. They're not even scanning for us, her tactical officer reported with disbelief. They're just moving straight toward Earth. They don't think they need to scan, Chen replied. They've done this 1,000 times before. Why would this time be any different? She studied the enemy formation. It was impressive and terrifying. Those ships were larger and more advanced than anything humanity possessed. Their weapons could destroy Earth's entire fleet in minutes. On paper, humanity had no chance. But war was not fought on paper. All units. This is Admiral Chen. She broadcast on the encrypted network that connected humanity's hidden forces. The enemy is approaching Point Alpha. Wait for my signal. Do not fire until I give the order, no matter what happens. Across the system, thousands of men and women waited in ships, stations, and hidden platforms. They were afraid. They would have been fools not to be. But they were also determined. They had seen the reports about what the hegemony did to species that resisted. They knew what was at stake. They were ready. The hegemony fleet passed the orbit of Neptune without incident. They passed Uranus. They continued toward the inner system, moving at a speed that would bring them to Earth within hours. Admiral Krethax grew bored. He had hoped the humans might put up some kind of resistance. Even a futile gesture would have been entertaining. Any sign of enemy forces? He asked. Negative, Admiral. His sensor officer replied. We have detected no ships, no weapons platforms, no orbital defenses. It appears they are not even attempting to resist. Cowards, Krethax spat. They speak of defiance and then hide when we arrive. Typical primitives. He was wrong. Humanity was not hiding. Humanity was waiting. The fleet passed the asteroid belt. This was the trigger point that Admiral Chen had chosen. The asteroids provided cover and concealment. They blocked sensor sweeps and hid things that would have been visible in open space. The hegemony fleet commanders did not even consider the asteroids worth scanning. Rocks were rocks. What could primitives do with rocks? Now, Admiral Chen said quietly, every hidden weapon in the asteroid belt fired at once. The first shots were not aimed at the hegemony ships. They were aimed at the fleet's formation. Thousands of missiles and kinetic projectiles streaked toward specific points in space. creating walls of debris and explosions that forced the enemy ships to change course. The perfect formation shattered in seconds as captains tried to avoid collisions. Then the real attack began. Human ships emerged from behind asteroids where they had been hidden for weeks. They were small, compared to the enemy vessels, but there were far more than the hegemony had expected. Not 40 ships, not 200, nearly 1,000 vessels of various sizes poured out of hiding, each one targeting a specific enemy ship based on plans that had been made and refined over months. Admiral Krethax stared at his display in shock. That's not possible. Where did they get so many ships? The answer was simple. Humanity had built them. Every shipyard in the system had worked around the clock for 6 months. Civilian vessels had been armed with military weapons. Mining ships had been fitted with missile launchers. Transport vessels had been converted into carriers for smaller attack craft. Humanity had turned every ship they had into a weapon. More importantly, they had hidden those ships. They had used asteroids and moons for cover. They had shut down power systems to avoid detection. They had waited in the cold darkness of space for the enemy to come to them. The hegemony had expected to find a few dozen primitive warships defending Earth. They found an ambush instead. All ships, return fire, Admiral Krethax roared. Destroy them. The hegemony fleet responded with devastating force. Their weapons were far superior to anything humanity possessed. Energy beams that could cut through mountains. Missiles that could destroy cities. Within the first minute of battle, 40 human ships were reduced to scattered debris. But the humans did not retreat. They pressed their attack with a ferocity that confused the hegemony commanders. Ships that should have fled instead charged directly at the enemy. Damaged vessels rammed themselves into enemy hulls rather than withdraw. Pilots sacrificed themselves to create openings for their comrades. Why won't they run? A Krithvor captain demanded over the command channel. They're losing ships by the dozen. Why don't they flee? There was no answer because the hegemony had no frame of reference for what they were seeing. In their experience, inferior species always broke when faced with superior force. It was logical. It was sensible. It was how the universe worked. Humans did not work that way. The battle raged for 3 hours. Human tactics were unlike anything the hegemony had encountered. Small ships worked together in coordinated groups, attacking from multiple angles at once. They targeted specific systems on enemy vessels, engines, sensors, weapon mounts. Rather than trying to destroy ships outright, they used the asteroids as cover, appearing and disappearing, making it impossible to track them all. When one human ship was destroyed, others would rush to collect escape pods, saving their comrades even under heavy fire. This baffled the hegemony completely. In their culture, the weak were left to die. Resources were not wasted on the fallen, but humans risked entire ships to save a handful of survivors. By the end of the 3rd hour, the impossible had happened. 12 hegemony ships had been destroyed. It was not a significant number compared to the 200 in the fleet. It was a tiny fraction of the enemy force, but it represented something that had not happened in 3,000 years. A cleansing fleet had taken casualties from a species it was supposed to be cleansing. Admiral Krethax stared at the tactical display showing the burning wreckage of his ships. Each one represented thousands of his warriors. Equipment that could not be easily replaced. Pride that had been damaged in ways that could not be measured. How? He whispered. They are primitives. How is this possible? The answer came from his tactical officer, who had been analyzing the human tactics throughout the battle. Admiral, they're not fighting like primitives. They're fighting like they've done this before. Their coordination is too precise. Their tactics are too refined. This is not improvisation. This is preparation. That's impossible. They only learned of our existence 6 months ago. 6 months was enough, the officer replied. They've been studying us, learning our patterns, identifying our weaknesses. Every attack they've made has been calculated to cause maximum damage with minimum resources. They knew exactly where to hit us. Admiral Krethax felt something he had not felt in centuries. Doubt. These creatures were not the helpless primitives he had expected. They were something else entirely. Admiral, we have a communication from the lead human vessel. Put it through. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired but unbroken. Behind her, her bridge crew worked with focused determination despite the losses they had suffered. Admiral Krethax, she said, your fleet has taken damage. Ours has taken more. But we're still here. We haven't run. We won't run. You can destroy every ship we have, and tomorrow there will be more. You can burn our cities, and we'll fight from the rubble. You can kill us by the millions, and the survivors will keep fighting. She leaned forward, her eyes hard. Is this really what you want? To bleed for every inch of space? To pay in ships and lives for a system that will never stop resisting? We're not your other conquests. We're humanity. Fighting is what we do. It's what we've always done. You will die. Admiral Krethax growled. All of you. Maybe, Chen admitted. Probably. But we'll take a lot of you with us. And when the next fleet comes, they'll face the same thing. And the next. And the next. Is humanity worth that price? She cut the transmission before he could respond. Admiral Krethax stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Then he turned to his communications officer. Send a message to the Grand Council. Tell them we have encountered unexpected resistance. Tell them we require reinforcements. Reinforcements, Admiral? For primitives? Just send the message. The Third Cleansing Fleet withdrew to the outer system to await support. They had not been defeated. They still outnumbered the humans and outgunned them completely. But they had been surprised, and surprise was not something the hegemony handled well. In the Sol system, humanity celebrated a victory that was not really a victory. They had lost 40 ships. Thousands of people had died. The enemy had only retreated temporarily. They would return with more ships, more weapons, more determination to prove that the natural order of the galaxy could not be challenged. But for one day, humanity had done the impossible. They had made an ancient and powerful enemy hesitate. They had proven that they were not easy prey. Admiral Chen addressed the survivors of the battle from her damaged flagship. What we did today has never been done before, she said. We stood against a force that has crushed hundreds of species. We made them pay for every shot they fired. We showed them that humanity will not go quietly into extinction. This war is not over. It's barely begun. They will come back with more ships. They will come back angry and desperate to prove that they're still the masters of the galaxy. The battles ahead will be harder than anything we faced today. But today we learned something important. We learned that they can bleed. We learned that they can be hurt. We learned that their tactics are old and predictable. And most importantly, we learned that we have something they've lost. We have the will to fight. Not because we want to conquer, not because we want to rule, but because we refuse to kneel. That's worth more than all the ships in their fleet. Prepare for what comes next. This was only the beginning. Across the galaxy, the Grand Council received Admiral Krethax's report. They read about the unexpected resistance. They saw the casualty figures. They learned that 12 ships had been lost to a species that should have been conquered in days. Archon Velith's crystalline form darkened with anger. This is unacceptable. These creatures are insects. They should have been crushed. They will be crushed, Admiral Krethax promised via holographic communication. I simply require additional forces. The humans have more ships than our intelligence suggested. They fight with unexpected coordination, but they cannot match our technology. With reinforcements, we will end this. You will have your reinforcements, the Archon declared. I am dispatching the First and Second Cleansing Fleets to join you. 600 ships. Enough to drown this system in fire. It will be done, Archon. Humanity will be a memory within the month. The transmission ended. The council members returned to their duties, confident that this minor setback would be corrected soon. The humans had fought well, surprisingly well, but they could not defy the inevitable. No species could, but one member of the council was not so certain. The Sindari representative lingered after the others departed. She had been reviewing the battle data, particularly the psychological profiles of the captured human communications. What she found disturbed her in ways she could not fully articulate. These humans fought without hope of victory. They sacrificed themselves for each other. They refused to surrender even when surrender was the only logical choice. This was not the behavior of a primitive species facing extinction. This was the behavior of a species that had faced extinction before, many times, and had survived anyway. She submitted a request for more intensive intelligence gathering. Someone needed to learn more about these humans, their history, their nature, what had made them into what they were. The council approved her request without much interest. They were already planning victory celebrations. They had no idea that the Sindari's investigation would reveal truths that would shake the foundations of the hegemony. The war had only just begun. And humanity was only getting started. The war had raged for 3 years. What was supposed to be a quick cleansing had become the longest conflict in recent hegemony history. Fleet after fleet had been sent to the Sol system. Fleet after fleet had returned damaged, diminished, or not at all. The humans should have been extinct by now. Every calculation, every prediction, every historical model said they should have been broken within the first month. They were outgunned, outproduced, and outmatched in every measurable way. And yet they kept fighting. They did more than fight. They improved. Human technology at the start of the war had been primitive. Their weapons were barely capable of scratching hegemony hull armor. Their shields were jokes. Their ships were slow and fragile. But with every battle, they learned. They captured enemy equipment and took it apart. They studied hegemony tactics and found weaknesses. They adapted at a rate that no species in hegemony history had ever matched. 3 years into the war, human ships were using energy weapons reverse-engineered from Valanthi technology. Their shields had been upgraded using principles stolen from the Krethvor. Their tactics had evolved into something that combined the best elements of every enemy they had faced with innovations that seemed to come from nowhere. The Grand Council was no longer laughing. Sindari High Mind Reader Vexalia stood before the council, her 4 black eyes reflecting the glow of Archon Velith's crystalline form. She had spent 2 years studying humanity. She had probed the minds of hundreds of captured humans. She had analyzed every piece of human culture, history, and psychology she could access. What she had found terrified her. "You asked me to investigate the nature of humanity," she began, her voice filling the chamber. "To understand why they fight, as they do, why they refuse to break, why they continue to resist when resistance should be impossible. I have my answer, and I must warn the council. It is not an answer you will want to hear." Archon Velith's form pulsed with impatience. "Speak, mind reader. We have no time for dramatic presentations. Our fleets are bleeding in that accursed system, while you play with words." Vexalia bowed her head slightly. "As you wish. I will be direct." She activated a holographic display that showed the planet Earth. It was not the peaceful blue sphere the Council had seen years before. Now it showed cities under attack, forests burning, and the scars of orbital bombardment. "Humanity is not a young species," she said. "They are not primitives who stumbled into the stars by accident. They are survivors. Their history is a continuous record of extinction-level events that they somehow endured." Images began to cycle through the display. Asteroid impacts, ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, plagues that killed millions. Their planet has tried to kill them many times, and they survived. But that is not what makes them dangerous. The display shifted to show human history. Not their achievements, but their conflicts. Humans have been at war with each other for their entire existence as a species. The Council watched in growing disbelief as image after image appeared. Ancient battles with swords and spears, medieval sieges with catapults and battering rams, trenches filled with poison gas and machine gun fire, cities reduced to ash by conventional and nuclear weapons, tanks rolling across devastated landscapes, aircraft dropping bombs that burned everything they touched. "These are not wars against other species," Vexalia continued. "These are wars against themselves. Humans have spent thousands of years developing increasingly efficient ways to kill each other. They have practiced war on a scale that we have never seen in a pre-spaceflight species." Admiral Krethax shifted uncomfortably. As the commander of the hegemony's military, he considered himself an expert on warfare, but the images on the display showed tactics and weapons that seemed designed by pure madness. "This is insanity," he growled. "What species wars against itself so viciously?" "Humans do," Vexalia replied. "And that is precisely the point. When we encountered them, we saw a species without natural weapons. No claws, no armor, no venom. We assumed they were weak. We were wrong. Humans have no natural weapons because they have never needed them. They create weapons. They innovate. They adapt. Their entire evolutionary history has been a process of developing better ways to survive and to fight." The display showed a mushroom cloud rising over a city. "This is a nuclear weapon. Humans developed it 80 years before they achieved spaceflight. They created a device capable of destroying entire cities, and they used it on each other. Not as a last resort, not as a desperate measure, as a tactical choice. They created weapons capable of ending their own species, and they survived anyway. They did not destroy themselves. They learned to live with the threat of annihilation. Archon Velith's crystalline form flickered with colors that indicated deep concern. You are saying that these creatures are insane? No, Vexalia said. I am saying they are adapted to conditions that we cannot imagine. They have faced extinction so many times that they no longer fear it. They fight with nothing to lose because they have already lost everything and rebuilt. Again, and again, and again. She turned to face the council directly. When I probed the minds of captured humans, I expected to find fear, terror of the hegemony, despair at their hopeless situation. Instead, I found something else entirely. I found anger. I found determination. I found a refusal to accept defeat that goes beyond logic or reason. And underneath all of that, I found memories. Racial memories passed down through generations. Memories of survival against impossible odds. Humans do not fight because they think they can win. They fight because they cannot accept the alternative. Submission is not in their nature. It has been bred out of them by thousands of years of conflict. Every human alive today is descended from ancestors who refused to give up, who kept fighting when all hope was lost, who survived because they simply would not die. The chamber was silent. The council members looked at each other with growing unease. Vexalia continued. There is more. Humans are social creatures. They form bonds with each other that we have difficulty understanding. They will sacrifice themselves for their families, for their friends, for strangers they have never met, for ideas that exist only in their minds. In the battles we have fought, our commanders have noted that humans rescue their wounded. They risk ships to save a single escape pod. They do not leave their dead behind. This behavior makes no tactical sense. It wastes resources. It costs lives, but it terrifies their enemies. Admiral Krethax leaned forward. Explain. When a hegemony soldier is wounded, they know they will be left behind if they cannot keep up. This is efficient. This is logical. But it also means our soldiers fight only for themselves. They have no expectation of help. Human soldiers fight knowing that their comrades will die to save them. They fight with absolute trust in each other. This makes them willing to take risks that no rational being would take. They advance into certain death because they believe their sacrifice will mean something. And it does. Their comrades remember. Their families remember. Their species remembers. We cannot match that. We have never been able to match that. The Archon's form was now dark with troubled colors. What are you suggesting, mind reader? That we cannot defeat these creatures? Vexalia hesitated. This was the part she had dreaded. I am suggesting that victory may cost more than we are willing to pay. Humans will not surrender. They have made that clear. They will fight until they are all dead. Every single one of them. Men, women, children. They will turn their planet into a fortress and die defending it. And they will make us pay for every life we take. But that is not the worst part. She brought up a new display showing the territories surrounding Sol System. Several systems that had been under hegemony control were now marked with different colors. The humans have been communicating with our slave species. They have been spreading their ideas, their concept of freedom, their belief that no one should kneel to another. The Carthax have rebelled on 3 worlds. The Melindri have assassinated their hegemony governor. The Venth have begun hiding escaped slaves and providing them with weapons. The humans are not just fighting us, they are teaching others to fight us. Admiral Krethax slammed his clawed fist on the arm of his chair. This is a military problem with a military solution. We have the ships. We have the weapons. We can crush the humans and anyone who supports them. Can we? Vexalia asked quietly. We have committed over 600 ships to the Sol system. We have lost nearly 200. The humans started with fewer ships than we have lost, and yet their fleet is now larger than when the war began. Every ship we destroy, they build 2 more. Every tactic we use, they counter within weeks. Every weapon we deploy, they analyze and find weaknesses. And while we focus on Sol, our slave species grow restless. The hegemony's power has always rested on the belief that resistance is futile. The humans are proving that belief wrong. Every day they survive is another day that our subjects see that the hegemony can be fought. We are not just fighting a species, we are fighting an idea. And ideas cannot be killed with ships. The council debated for hours after Vexalia's presentation. Some argued for immediate and total war. Deploy every ship, burn every human world to bedrock. Accept the losses and end this. Others argued for negotiation. Offer the humans terms that preserved some dignity. Anything to stop the bleeding. In the end, they chose neither. They chose to continue the war, as they had been fighting it, sending more fleets, suffering more losses, and hoping that eventually the humans would break. They would not break. In the Sol system, Admiral Chen received intelligence reports about the Council's debate. Human spies had penetrated deep into hegemony space. They had allies among the slave species who fed them information. The humans knew more about the hegemony than the hegemony knew about them. They're confused, she told her senior officers. They don't understand us. They keep waiting for us to give up, and when we don't, they have no idea what to do. Can we win? Asked Captain Marcus Webb, commander of the human carrier fleet. Chen considered the question carefully. Define win. If you mean destroy the hegemony and conquer the galaxy, no. We don't have the resources for that. Not yet. But if you mean survive, remain free, force them to accept that we're not going to be conquered, she smiled grimly. That we can do. We just have to keep doing what we've been doing. Adapt, fight, survive, make them pay for every inch. The hegemony has ruled for 40,000 years because no one has ever seriously challenged them. Their tactics are old. Their thinking is rigid. They've forgotten how to deal with real opposition. We're going to remind them. The war continued. Human tactics grew more sophisticated. They struck at supply lines. They sabotaged repair facilities. They turned captured hegemony technology into weapons and used it against its creators. Most devastatingly, they weaponized information. Human agents spread stories among the slave species. Tales of human victories, tales of hegemony losses, tales of a small species that refused to kneel and somehow survived. Rebellions began to spread. Not large ones, not yet, but enough to force the hegemony to divert resources. Ships that should have been fighting humans were instead suppressing riots on worlds that had been peaceful for millennia. The hegemony was not losing the war. Not exactly. They were still stronger. They still held more territory. They still had more ships, but they were not winning either. And for a power that had known nothing but victory for thousands of years, that was almost the same thing. In the depths of space, the Third Cleansing Fleet, rebuilt after its initial defeat, prepared for another assault on the Sol system. Admiral Krethax stood on his command deck, staring at the stars. He had spent 3 years fighting humans. He had learned to respect them, even as he hated them. They were everything the Krethvor admired. Fierce, resourceful, relentless. In another universe, they might have been allies, but this was not that universe. He had his orders. The humans had to die. He just wished he was more confident that he could make that happen. Signal the fleet, he commanded. We move on Sol at first light. His officers acknowledged the order. Around him, 200 ships powered up their engines and prepared for another round of combat against an enemy that should have been long dead. The war was entering its 4th year, and humanity was still fighting. 5 years had passed since the first hegemony ship entered the Sol system. 5 years of war. 5 years of blood and fire and sacrifice. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The hegemony still existed, but it was no longer the undisputed master of the stars. Cracks had appeared in its foundation. Slave species that had served obediently for millennia now whispered about freedom. Military commanders who had never known failure now questioned their strategies. The Grand Council, once united in arrogance, now fractured with blame and fear. Humanity had not only survived, humanity had grown. The human fleet that emerged from hyperspace above Valanthi Prime was not the desperate collection of converted civilian ships that had fought in the first battle. It was an armada, 3,000 vessels of war, each one built for a single purpose, to bring the fight to the enemy's doorstep. At the center of the formation flew the ESS Vengeance, humanity's first purpose-built dreadnought. It was 2 kilometers of armor, weapons, and righteous anger. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on its command deck, watching as the Valanthi homeworld appeared on her screens. It was beautiful, in its way. A world of crystal spires and geometric cities that caught the light of their sun and scattered it into rainbows. The Valanthi had built their civilization on pure logic and order. Everything was precise. Everything was controlled. Everything was perfect. Not for much longer. Admiral, her tactical officer reported, the Hegemony Defense Fleet is moving to intercept. Approximately 400 vessels. They're forming a protective sphere around the planet. Chen nodded. 400 ships. The largest force the hegemony had assembled since the war began. They had stripped ships from border patrols, from occupation fleets, from every corner of their domain to defend their capital. Good, she said. That means there's fewer of them everywhere else. The human fleet was not alone. Mixed among the human vessels were ships of other designs. Carthax cruisers, Melindri frigates, Venth carriers, and dozens of other species that had risen up against the hegemony and joined humanity's cause. They called themselves the Liberation Alliance. 3 years ago, most of these species had been slaves. Now they were warriors, trained by humans, armed with human weapons, fighting for a future that humans had promised them, a future of freedom. All Alliance vessels. This is Admiral Chen, she broadcast across the combined fleet. Today we stand before the heart of the hegemony. For 40,000 years, the Valanthi have ruled from this world. They have decided who lives and who dies. They have crushed anyone who dared to challenge their authority. Today, we challenge it. Not because we want their power, not because we want revenge, but because the galaxy needs to know that tyranny can be defeated, that the strong do not always win, that freedom is not a gift from the powerful but a right that belongs to everyone. When this battle is over, the universe will never be the same. Whatever happens, we have already won that much. All ships, prepare for combat. The two fleets closed on each other. The hegemony formation was perfect. Each ship exactly where it should be according to tactical doctrine that had not changed in centuries. The human formation looked chaotic by comparison. Ships moving in groups that seemed random, but were actually calculated to confuse targeting systems. Archon Veleth watched from his command center on the planet's surface. His crystalline form pulsed with colors that reflected his emotional state. Anger, fear, and something he had not felt in 3,000 years. Uncertainty. How did it come to this? He asked the empty room. They were nothing. Primitive creatures on a primitive world. How did they bring an army to my doorstep? There was no one to answer him. Most of his advisors had fled or been arrested for failures during the war. The Krithvor military leadership had been decimated in battle after battle. The Sindari had retreated to their homeworld, refusing to commit more forces to what they called a war without logic. The hegemony was alone. The first shots were fired at maximum range. Energy beams and missiles crossed the space between the fleets. Shields flared. Ships died. The battle for Valanthi Prime had begun. Human tactics had evolved far beyond what the hegemony had faced in the early days of the war. Small ships worked in coordinated groups of 5, covering each other's weaknesses. Larger vessels provided suppressive fire that pinned enemy formations in place. Carriers launched swarms of fighters that overwhelmed point defense systems. The allied species had brought their own advantages. The Carthax were natural pilots, capable of maneuvers that seemed impossible. The Melindri ships could phase partially out of normal space, making them nearly impossible to hit. The Venth had a hive mind connection that allowed perfect coordination without communication. Alone, none of these species could have challenged the hegemony. Together, united under human leadership, they were devastating. Admiral Chen directed the battle from the Vengeance's command deck. She had studied every major naval battle in human history. She had learned from Earth's greatest military minds. She had added everything she had learned from fighting the hegemony for 5 years. 3rd Attack Group, target their flagship's engines. 2nd Carrier Wing, launch fighters to intercept those incoming bombers. All dreadnoughts, concentrate fire on Sector 7. Break their formation. Her orders flowed in a constant stream, adapting to the changing battle in real time. She didn't wait for the enemy to make mistakes. She forced them to make mistakes. The hegemony defense fleet fought desperately. They were defending their homeworld. They were fighting for survival. And despite everything, they still had more ships, better technology, and individual warriors who were skilled and brave. It wasn't enough. 2 hours into the battle, the hegemony formation collapsed. Not because they had lost too many ships, but because they had lost coordination. Human electronic warfare systems jammed their communications. Targeted strikes had killed their senior commanders. Ships that had always operated as parts of a perfect machine were now fighting alone, and they didn't know how. Admiral Krethax was one of the few commanders still alive and still fighting. His flagship, the Extinction's Promise, had survived a dozen engagements over the years. It bore scars from human weapons, patches where hull breaches had been repaired, systems that worked at half capacity because replacements were not available. He watched the battle turn against the hegemony and felt something he had never expected. Admiration. "They have beaten us," he said quietly to his bridge crew. "Not with superior technology, not with greater numbers. They beat us because they were willing to change, and we were not. Admiral, we can still fight, we can still—" "No." Krethax made his decision. "Signal the human flagship. Tell them I wish to communicate with Admiral Chen." A few minutes later, Chen's face appeared on his screen. She looked tired. There were lines around her eyes that had not been there 5 years ago. But she also looked calm, confident, like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. "Admiral Krethax," she said, "this is unexpected. I have spent 5 years fighting you." Krethax replied, "I have lost warriors. I have lost ships. I have lost things I cannot even name. And through all of it, I have wondered how a species like yours could do what you have done. I think I finally understand." Chen waited, saying nothing. "We looked at you and saw weakness, short lives, soft bodies, no natural weapons. We thought these things made you inferior. We were wrong. Your short lives make you urgent. You do not wait for anything because you do not have time to wait. Your soft bodies make you creative. You build tools because you must. Your lack of natural weapons made you forge weapons beyond anything nature could provide. And your history of conflict, your endless wars against yourselves, gave you something we lost long ago: the ability to adapt, to change, to face the impossible and find a way through it." Chen nodded slowly. "Is there a point to this, Admiral?" "The point is that I am done fighting you. My fleet is beaten. My world is about to fall. But I will not throw away more lives in a hopeless cause. I am offering surrender. My ships will stand down. My warriors will lay down their weapons. I ask only that they be treated with honor." Chen studied him for a long moment. In 5 years of war, no hegemony commander had ever surrendered. The very concept was foreign to their culture. For Krethax to offer this was more than a military decision. It was a complete rejection of everything he had believed. "Your offer is accepted," she said. "Your warriors will be treated with the honor they deserve. They fought well. They have nothing to be ashamed of." Krethax's scales shifted in what might have been relief. "And the Archon? The Archon will answer for his crimes. He made the decision to attack us. He ordered the deaths of millions. He must face consequences. I expected nothing less." Krethax ended the transmission and gave the order for his remaining ships to surrender. The battle was effectively over. Scattered hegemony ships continued to fight, but without leadership or coordination, they were being destroyed or captured one by one. The Liberation Alliance fleet secured orbital control and began preparations for landing operations. Admiral Chen ordered a communication channel open to the planet below. "Archon Velith," she broadcast. "The battle is over. Your fleet has been defeated. Your allies have abandoned you. You have nothing left to fight with. This is your one chance to end this without more death. Surrender yourself and your council. Face judgment for your crimes. In return, I guarantee that no harm will come to your civilian population. Refuse, and we will come down there and take you by force. Many people will die. I would prefer to avoid that. The choice is yours." There was a long silence. Then the Archon's voice came through, cold and brittle. "You dare speak to me of judgment? I have ruled for 3,000 years. I have brought order to chaos. I have lifted primitive species from darkness. Who are you to judge me?" Chen's response was calm. "I am Sarah Chen of Earth. 5 years ago, you sent a fleet to destroy my people because we refused to kneel. You thought we were insects to be crushed. You thought our refusal to submit was foolishness. Now I stand above your world with an army at my back, and I'm offering you mercy you never offered anyone else. That's who I am. You have 1 hour to decide." She cut the transmission. Archon Velith stood in his command center, surrounded by the ruins of his empire. The screens showed enemy ships in orbit. The reports confirmed that his fleet was destroyed or captured. The Sindari had abandoned him. The Krethvor had surrendered. He was alone. For 3,000 years, he had ruled through fear and strength. He had never considered that strength might fail. He had never planned for a situation where fear was not enough. The humans had planned. The humans had adapted. The humans had taken every obstacle and turned it into an opportunity. They had done what the Volanthi could not. They had changed. His hour was almost up when he finally spoke. "Tell the humans I accept their terms. I will surrender." It was not courage that drove his decision. It was pure logic. Fighting would accomplish nothing except more death. Surrendering might preserve something. It was the only rational choice. The Volanthi had always prided themselves on being rational. Admiral Chen received word of the surrender just as the deadline expired. She ordered the landing operations to proceed peacefully. Human soldiers, accompanied by warriors from a dozen allied species, descended to the crystal cities of Volanthi Prime. They met no resistance. Archon Velith was found in his command center, waiting. He made no attempt to flee or fight. When human soldiers approached him, he simply said, "I wish to speak with Admiral Chen." Chen came down to the planet's surface that evening. The sun was setting on Volanthi Prime, and the crystal spires of the capital city glowed with the colors of dying light. It was beautiful in a way that made her sad. So much had been destroyed to reach this moment. The Archon was held in what had been his own throne room. His crystalline body seemed dimmer than the images she had seen. Defeat had taken something from him. "I have one question," he said when she entered. "I need to understand. How? How did you do this?" Chen considered the question. It was the question that everyone had been asking for 5 years. How did humanity survive? How did they win? "You want the truth?" she asked. "We almost didn't. So many times. We were one battle away from extinction, one mistake away from losing everything. There were moments when even I thought we couldn't continue. But we did. Not because we were stronger or smarter or better. We continued because we couldn't accept the alternative. Surrender wasn't something we could do. It's not in our nature. You spent 40,000 years building an empire based on the idea that the strong rule and the weak serve. You forgot that strength isn't just about power. It's about will. It's about refusing to give up even when giving up makes sense. Humans aren't the strongest species in the galaxy. We're not the smartest or the most advanced. But we might be the most stubborn. And sometimes that's enough." The Archon's form flickered. "What will happen now? To my people? To the hegemony? The hegemony is finished. It can never be what it was. Too much has changed. The slave species are free, and they will never accept chains again. But the Volanthi don't have to end. Your people can choose a different path. They can be part of what comes next, instead of trying to hold on to what came before. That's the lesson we learned on Earth. Civilizations end when they refuse to change. The ones that survive are the ones that adapt." She turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth, I take no pleasure in this. I didn't want this war. I didn't want any of this. I wanted to explore the stars and meet new species and discover wonders. You took that from me. You took that from all of us. But I won't let hatred define what we do next. We have a chance to build something better. I intend to take that chance." She left him there, surrounded by guards, waiting for the judgment that would come. Outside, the stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Stars that had watched empires rise and fall for billions of years. Stars that would watch humanity and its allies try to build something new. The war was not over. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, more decisions that kept Admiral Chen awake at night. But the hardest part was done. The hegemony had been broken. The slaves had been freed. The galaxy knew that tyranny could be defeated. Now came the real challenge, building something better. The trial of Archon Velith lasted 3 months. Representatives from every species that had suffered under the hegemony came to testify. They spoke of slavery, of genocide, of cultures erased and peoples broken. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdict was never in doubt. But the trial was not about punishment. It was about truth. For 40,000 years, the hegemony had controlled not just territory but history itself. They had decided which species deserved to exist and which would be forgotten. They had written records that praised their rule and erased their crimes. The truth had been buried so deep that even the oppressors had forgotten it. Now the truth came out. The Volanthi had not always been conquerors. They had once been explorers, curious beings who wanted to understand the universe. But somewhere along the way, curiosity had become arrogance. Understanding had become control. They had decided that their way was the only way, and anyone who disagreed was inferior. The Krethvor had been a proud warrior culture, but the hegemony had twisted that pride into cruelty. They had been told that strength meant domination, that mercy was weakness, that honor could only be found in conquest. Generations of Krethvor had lived and died believing these lies. The slave species had suffered most of all. The Carthax had once been artists and poets. The Melindri had been philosophers. The Venth had been builders of great beauty. All of that had been stripped away. They had been reduced to labor and service, their cultures destroyed, their histories forgotten. As the trial continued, something unexpected happened. The accused became teachers, the surviving hegemony leaders, forced to face the reality of what they had done, began to answer questions, not with defiance or excuses, but with genuine attempts to explain. How had this happened? How had they justified it to themselves? How could anyone believe that such cruelty was acceptable? The answers were disturbing in their simplicity. They had believed they were doing the right thing. They had been raised in a system that told them they were superior, and they had never questioned it. They had seen other species not as people but as resources to be managed. They had convinced themselves that the slaves were better off under hegemony rule than struggling on their own. They had been wrong, but they had been sincere. Admiral Chen watched the final day of testimony from the gallery. She had declined to participate in the trial directly. She was a soldier, not a lawyer. Her job had been to win the war. Others would decide what came after. But she could not stay away entirely. She needed to see how it ended. Archon Velith stood before the tribunal, waiting for judgment. His crystalline form had dimmed even further over the months of trial. Some said he was dying, that Valanthi needed purpose to survive, and he had lost his. The chief judge, a Carthax named Scholar Vess who had spent 3 decades as a slave before the war, delivered the verdict. Archon Velith, you have been found guilty of crimes against sentient life. You ordered the destruction of civilizations. You commanded the enslavement of billions. You maintained a system of oppression that caused suffering beyond calculation. The evidence is clear. The testimony is overwhelming. There is no doubt of your guilt. But judgment is not simply about guilt. It is about justice. And justice must consider not just what has been done, but what must be done. You are old, Archon. By Valanthi standards, you are ancient. You could be executed, but what would that accomplish? Another death added to millions? Revenge dressed as justice? Instead, you are sentenced to live. You will spend your remaining years in the archives of memory, recording everything you know about the hegemony, its crimes, its methods, its justifications. You will create a testament to what happened and why, so that future generations will understand how tyranny grows and how it can be prevented. Your knowledge will serve the future instead of destroying it. This is your sentence. This is your purpose. Veleth's form flickered with colors that the observers did not recognize. Surprise, perhaps. Or something else. You show mercy, he said. After everything I have done, you offer me purpose instead of death. Why? Scholar Vess leaned forward. Because mercy is what separates justice from revenge. The hegemony never understood that. We do. That is why we won. The trial ended. The galaxy began the long process of rebuilding. 1 year after the fall of Valanthi Prime, representatives from over 200 species gathered on a space station in neutral territory. The station had been built specifically for this moment. It was called Unity Station, and it hung in the void between the stars like a promise. Admiral Chen attended as Earth's representative. She had not wanted the role. She was tired of leadership, tired of decisions, tired of being the symbol of humanity's struggle. But her people had asked, and she could not refuse them. The purpose of the gathering was simple: to create something new. The hegemony was dead, but its territory remained. Hundreds of star systems, billions of people, resources and infrastructure that could not simply be abandoned. Some species wanted to divide everything equally. Others wanted to claim what they had conquered during the war. A few wanted revenge against the former hegemony species. The debates lasted for weeks. Chen listened more than she spoke. She had learned that wisdom often came from unexpected places. Finally, when the discussions had exhausted themselves without resolution, she stood to address the assembly. I have heard many proposals over the past weeks, she said. Many of them are reasonable. Many reflect the genuine needs and concerns of your peoples. But none of them answer the fundamental question: what do we want to become? The hegemony ruled through fear. They built an empire based on the idea that some species are better than others. That power gives the right to control, that the weak should serve the strong. We destroyed that empire. But if we simply divide its territory among ourselves, if we fight over resources and settle old grudges, then we have changed nothing. We will become exactly what we fought against. I did not lead humanity through 5 years of war so that we could become new tyrants. I did not watch my friends die so that we could replace one empire with another. Earth proposes something different, something that has never been tried on a galactic scale. She activated a holographic display that showed a document. It was lengthy and detailed, but its core was simple. We proposed the Galactic Concord, an alliance of equals. Every species has one voice, regardless of size or power. Decisions are made together, not imposed from above. Disputes are resolved through dialogue, not warfare. No species rules another. No species serves another. Trade is free. Movement is free. Ideas are free. It will not be easy. We are different from each other in countless ways. We have different values, different cultures, different needs, but we also have something in common. We all know what it means to be oppressed. We all know the value of freedom. We can build something better. Not perfect, not free from conflict, but better than what came before. The assembly was silent for a long moment. Then the Carthax representative rose. Earth asks us to trust each other, to put aside our fears and our grievances, to believe that cooperation is possible across the vast differences between us. This is difficult, perhaps impossible, but the Carthax remember what it was to be slaves. We remember what it was to have no voice. Earth gave us back our voice. Earth fought and bled and died so that we could stand here as free people. If Earth asks us to trust, then we will trust. The Carthax support the Concord. One by one, other species rose to add their support. The Melindri, the Venth, dozens of others, even some of the former hegemony species, those who had seen the truth during the trial, who wanted to be part of something better than what they had known. The vote was not unanimous. Some species refused to participate. Some departed to build their own futures alone. That was their right under the Concord. Freedom meant freedom to choose, even if the choice was to walk away. But most stayed. Most voted yes. Most decided to try. The Galactic Concord was born. Admiral Chen returned to Earth a hero. Parades were held. Monuments were built. Her name was spoken with reverence in schools and assemblies. She hated all of it. What she had done was not heroic. It was necessary. She had not saved humanity because she was special. She had done it because someone had to. And she was the one who was there. The real heroes were the ones who had not survived. The pilots who had rammed their ships into enemy vessels. The soldiers who had held defensive lines until they were overwhelmed. The engineers who had kept damaged ships flying long enough to make a difference. The ordinary people who had worked in factories, tended wounded, raised children in the middle of a war. They were the heroes. She was just the one who gave orders. 5 years after the war ended, Chen retired from military service. She bought a small house on the coast of what had once been called California. She spent her days watching the ocean and thinking about everything that had happened. Sometimes old friends visited. Captain Webb, who now commanded Earth's contribution to the conquered fleet. Scientists who had developed the technologies that saved humanity. Leaders from other species who had fought alongside humans and wanted to share memories of fallen comrades. She welcomed them all. She listened to their stories. She shared meals and drinks and moments of peace. But she also spent time alone, processing, healing, trying to find meaning in the violence and loss. One evening, she sat on her porch watching the sunset. A small transport ship descended from the sky and landed nearby. She recognized the markings. It was a Valanthi vessel. A figure emerged and walked toward her. It was a young Valanthi, her crystalline form bright with the colors of curiosity and hope. "Admiral Chen?" the visitor asked. "I am Prismatic Voice of Tomorrow. I have traveled from the archives to meet you." Chen invited her to sit. "What brings a Valanthi to my door? I am a student of history. I have been learning about the war, about the hegemony, about how things were and how they changed. I have read the testimonies. I have studied the records, but there is something I cannot find in the archives." "What is that?" "Understanding." The young Valanthi's form flickered with confusion. "I know the facts. I know what happened. But I do not understand why. Why did your species fight so hard? Why did you risk everything when surrender would have been easier?" Why did you refuse to give up even when all logic said you should? Chen thought about the question for a long time. It was the question that everyone asked. It was the question she had asked herself countless times. I can tell you what I believe, she finally said. But you may not find it satisfying. Please. Humans fight because we cannot imagine not fighting. When something threatens what we love, we do not calculate odds or weigh costs. We just resist. It is not always logical. It is not always wise. But it is who we are. We are a species that has always struggled. Against nature. Against each other. Against our own worst impulses. That struggle has shaped us in ways that we do not fully understand ourselves. But here is the thing that I think matters most. She looked at the young Valanthe with eyes that had seen too much. We fight not just for ourselves, but for each other, for our families, for our friends, for strangers we will never meet, for ideas that exist only in our minds. We fight for the future, even when we will not live to see it. The hegemony never understood that. They saw us as individuals to be broken. They did not see that humans are never truly individuals. We are always part of something larger. A family, a community, a species. When you attack one human, you attack all of us. That connection is our greatest strength. It is what made us fight. It is what made us win. The young Valanthe sat in silence, processing these words. Finally, she spoke. The hegemony tried to eliminate connection. They separated families. They erased cultures. They told each species that they were alone. Yes, but humans taught the galaxy that connection could not be destroyed. That freedom was worth dying for. That no one has to face darkness alone. I suppose we did. Prismatic voice of tomorrow stood. Her form glowed with new colors. Determination. Purpose. I understand now. Thank you, Admiral. What will you do with this understanding? I will teach it. I will ensure that future generations know not just what happened, but why it matters. The Valanthe need to learn that strength is not about domination. We need to learn to connect. That is a worthy goal. The young Valanthe departed. Chen watched her ship rise into the sky and disappear among the stars. She sat alone on her porch as darkness fell. The stars appeared one by one, the same stars that had watched humanity struggle and survive and reach beyond their small world. Those stars now held friends, allies, partners in a concord that was still young and fragile but growing stronger every day. It was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still injustices, still beings who clung to old hatreds and old fears. The work was never done, but there was hope. Humanity had gone to the stars and found not conquerors to kneel before, but brothers and sisters to stand with. They had faced extinction and survived. They had fought tyrants and won, and in doing so, they had changed the galaxy forever. The hegemony had ruled through fear for 40,000 years. Humanity had ended that reign in 5. Not because humans were the strongest or the smartest or the best, but because they refused to give up. Because they believed in something worth fighting for. Because they understood that freedom was not a gift to be granted, but a right to be claimed. Admiral Chen smiled as she watched the stars. The war was over. The future had begun, and whatever challenges came next, humanity would face them the same way they always had, together.